Hi everyone! Welcome to my 6th installment of my Worst of the Skeptics series, where we cringe at how stupid otherwise smart people can be when it comes to veganism. We've covered Sam Harris, Matt Dillahunty, Richard Dawkins, and today we'll be reviewing Neil deGrasse Tyson's book, Starry Messenger, or rather a chapter from his book titled Meatarians and Vegetarians, where he spews a bunch of anti-vegan nonsense. He's so set in his carnist ways that he dedicated an entire chapter of his book to debunking the vegan philosophy. To be an astrophysicist, you have to possess a high level of intelligence. But intelligence in one area clearly does not always translate to intelligence in other areas. Going into this, I expected a lot of mental gymnastics, but I didn't expect such piss-poor writing. Like, say what you want about Sam Harris, but at least he's a good writer. Apart from the false claims and fallacious reasoning, which we'll get into later, this chapter is rambly, disorganized, and lacks cohesion. I haven't read any of his other books, but judging from this chapter alone, his writing style is atrocious. It reads like a first draft written by a 5th grader. Take this paragraph, for example.
The production of animal-based foods is the pride of assembly line manufacturing in the industrialized world. Do you live elsewhere? The tree of life is well sampled for dinner, and many meals include horse, ostrich, emu, kangaroo, and dog. Let's not forget rodents. In Texas, I once ate barbecued squirrel. Still had some lead pellets in it from being shot. Had to pull those from my mouth one by one. After all that, not much meat in there. Of course, it tasted like chicken.
Cool story, bro. What purpose does this anecdote serve? What purpose does this entire paragraph serve? Something Neil did here that I noticed he does a lot is list a bunch of things unnecessarily, as if he's trying to hit a minimum word count. Here's how he opens the chapter.
In Western culture, meat eaters don't tend to have reasons or philosophies behind their food choices. They simply enjoy the taste of dead animals. Breaded, fried, grilled, cured, barbecued, roasted, sous vide, and smoked.
You can barbecue it, boil it, broil it, bake it, saute it. There's shrimp kebabs, shrimp creole, shrimp gumbo, pan fried, deep fried, stir fried. There's pineapple shrimp, lemon shrimp, coconut shrimp, pepper shrimp, shrimp soup, shrimp stew, shrimp salad, shrimp and potatoes, shrimp burger, shrimp sandwich.
And here's another example.
The largest species of animal ever on Earth is alive today, the blue whale. A mammal carnivore dining principally on a centimetre-sized crustacean called krill. Tons of it per day. The largest land animals today are also mammals and include the elephant, hippopotamus, rhinoceros, giraffe, water buffalo, and bison. They're all herbivores. Polar bears are on the list too, but of course, they're carnivores. Grizzly bears are opportunistic omnivores and will eat anything they want, including humans.
The point of an example is to add clarity, not fluff. The examples I just provided serve to strengthen my point that his writing is juvenile. Neil's examples, on the other hand, add nothing substantive. Assuming this book was written for young adults, there's no need to explain the difference between predator versus prey animals, or provide examples of mammals. We know what a mammal is. Unless you're arguing for animal rights, you don't have to spell out elementary school concepts to adults. Here's yet another example of how Neil does not know how to properly utilize examples in his writing. It's a wordy paragraph, so bear with me.
The urge to treat one species of animal differently in any way is called speciesism. Think racism or sexism, but in this case, you're biased against some animals simply because of their genetic distance from humans in the tree of life, or because they're repulsive to look at. How many animal lovers march with placards demanding to save the leeches, mosquitoes, ticks, tapeworms, and lice? Or how about the guinea worm, whose primary host is humans? We'd just as soon see them all go extinct. Hardly anybody makes plush toys of these parasites, yet they're all creatures on God's green earth, just trying to survive like everybody else. Can't blame them for not being cuddly mammals with adorable eyes and bushy tails. Following this argument further, one could choose not to eat animals at all, living life as a vegetarian. But when you think about it, that's being speciesist against plant life. For example, maybe you live in a plush suburb. You capture a mouse in your basement using a humane trap. You then re-release the mouse into the wild. You feel good because you're against killing animals. What you've done, however, is add to the tray of tasty snacks for owls, hawks, snakes, foxes, and other vertebrate predators, unwittingly sealing an early death for the hapless mouse. Its life expectancy is far greater living in the warmth and safety of your home.
If you were following carefully, you may have noticed that his example was a non sequitur. He says, following this argument further, one could choose not to eat animals at all, living life as a vegetarian. But when you think about it, that's being speciesist against plant life. For example, maybe you live in a plush suburb. You capture a mouse in your basement using a humane trap, blah blah blah. This is not an example of vegans being speciesist against plants. He's arguing that while our intentions are pure, by using humane traps we're sentencing mice to a worse fate. What does this have to do with plants? It'd be like saying anti-abortion activists only care about babies in the womb. They don't care about babies after they're born. For example, they want to teach abstinence-only education. Like, that does not follow. A final example of Neil's poor writing is his choice of references. The synopsis on his website describes this book as a trove of insights informed by the universe and brought to you by the methods and tools of science. Yet his external references include Beef Magazine, his personal Twitter beef with animal rights activist and musician Moby, PETA, fairy tales like The Three Little Pigs, Little Red Riding Hood, and the Bible, science fiction like Avatar, E.T., and Guardians of the Galaxy, the children's show Lamb Chop, and the sitcom The Big Bang Theory. References to pop culture can be a useful literary tool, but the way Neil deploys them is often pointless. And you would think, given the subject matter, there would be an even mix of academic references and pop culture references. But not once does he reference experts in the fields of biology, anthropology, or nutrition. Let's move on to address his false claims and fallacious reasoning. Neil makes the claim,
no matter what you eat, if you source foods locally, you minimize the transportation footprint, which may be better for the environment than a simple vegetarian diet that pays no regard to where the plants were harvested.
Neil is simply wrong here. Land use and other factors are much more significant than transportation when it comes to the ecological footprint of foods. It takes a monumental amount of resources to raise animals for food. Bananas and avocados shipped from South America have a much smaller footprint than locally sourced meat. Theoretically, you could create a plant-exclusive diet that's worse than a meat-inclusive diet. But such a diet doesn't represent what vegans actually eat, even those who pay no mind to where their food comes from. He then claims,
the production of meat in the US is staggeringly efficient. Across all 50 states, for example, we consume 9 billion chickens per year, a rate that's 3 times higher than the world average. If you do the math, you get 1 million per hour, with each chicken living anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks before slaughter. Yes, for every hour of every day the US hatches, raises, kills, distributes, and eats 1 million chickens. At a few dollars a pound in some retail outlets, chicken constitutes some of the most inexpensive protein you can consume in the marketplace. We're quite efficient at making cattle too, although they take more time, 1 to 2 years before being brought to slaughter. They also occupy much more space than chickens. Not only physically, but on the ranch. Depending on the terrain, one grass-fed bovine will require many acres of land to graze. Don't want them to graze? Instead, cram them into feedlots where they create mountains of manure and rivers of urine. The largest among these in the US packs 150,000 cattle into 800 acres. When ready for slaughter, a single 1,200-pound animal will supply nearly 500 pounds of meat.
Neil is right when he says that chicken is more efficient than beef, and that factory farms beef is more efficient than grass-fed, pasture-raised beef. However, efficient is a relative term. Compared to plant farming, animal farming is staggeringly inefficient. Inexpensive is also a relative term. He says chicken is some of the most inexpensive protein in the supermarket, omitting the fact that vegan staples like legumes are the most inexpensive protein in the supermarket. Also notable here is the way he speaks so callously about the billions of sentient beings that we needlessly slaughter every year. Which brings me to my next critique, which is his use of emotive language while implicitly criticizing vegans for being too emotional. On the very first page, he says, there's always that evangelical vegetarian who tries to lure away meat eaters. Words like evangelical and lure have negative connotations. There's also his disturbing statement from earlier. The production of animal-based foods is the pride of assembly line manufacturing in the industrialized world. Pride, of course, has positive connotations. Is factory farming really the pride of assembly line manufacturing? I would say that of all the things to come out of industrialization, it's the most shameful. And then there's his bizarre reference to his Twitter beef with Moby, pun intended.
Modern cattle were genetically invented by humans via selective breeding of the now extinct ox-like Eurasian aurochs. The goal? To exquisitely design a biological machine that turns grass into steak or into milk, if you prefer. I posted a version of that sentence on Twitter, and some people nearly lost their minds. Most notably, the American musician and animal rights activist, Moby. In an Instagram post, he scolded, "When one of your heroes breaks your heart, Neil deGrasse Tyson, really? You can tweet that and make light of the unspeakable suffering experienced by the hundreds and billions of animals killed each year by humans? For a smart physicist, Neil deGrasse Tyson, you sound like an ignorant sociopath." Moby's full post and my even fuller reply are elsewhere. All that matters here is that my statement was a simple expression of fact, offering no opinion at all with the added imagery of a biological machine. Some people thought my tweet was pro-animal slaughter, while others thought it was a blunt appeal to turn everyone into a vegetarian. More evidence we carry fillers that bias how we process neutral information. Moby has since apologised for the tone, but what's unforgettable here is the intensity of his well-founded activism.
Moby was absolutely right to be appalled by Neil's flippant description of sentient beings as objects whose sole purpose is to serve our selfish desires. I thought it was amusing that he interpreted Moby's reaction as intense rather than proportionate, and ironic that he didn't see his own reaction as the emotional outburst that it is. People lost their minds. I was scolded for merely stating a fact. He sees his tweet as a neutral statement of fact because he's speciesist. And that brings me to my next point, possibly the meat of my critique, which is that Neil does not understand the concept of speciesism. He's so close to getting it when he says this:
I've seen all manner of justifications to eat or not eat one branch of animals versus others in the tree of life. Consider also the huge outcry against net-caught tuna because an occasional air-breathing mammalian dolphin gets caught in the net, suffocating because it can't swim back to the surface and catch a breath. Tragic indeed. Personally, I seek out line-caught tuna for that reason. Amid the outpouring of sympathy for the dead dolphin and all the lobbying to save them, where's our collective concern for the dead tuna? We have none. Because they're destined for the sushi bar or small tin cans on your supermarket shelves. Imagine if a delicatessen started offering dolphin salad sandwiches on its lunch offerings. Protests would surely amass out front. Not because the deli serves sandwiches that contain dead chickens, dead turkeys, dead pigs, dead cattle, dead salmon, and yes, dead tuna, but because it serves dead dolphins.
But what immediately follows is this passage from earlier.
The urge to treat one species of animal differently in any way is called speciesism. Think racism or sexism, but in this case, you're biased against some animals simply because of their genetic distance from humans in the tree of life, or because they're repulsive to look at. How many animal lovers march with placards demanding to save the leeches, mosquitoes, ticks, tapeworms, and lice? Or how about the guinea worm, whose primary host is humans? We'd just as soon see them all go extinct. Hardly anybody makes plush toys of these parasites, yet they're all creatures on God's green earth, just trying to survive like everybody else. Can't blame them for not being cuddly mammals with adorable eyes and bushy tails. Following this argument further, one could choose not to eat animals at all, living life as a vegetarian. But when you think about it, that's being speciesist against plant life.
Speciesism is discrimination based on species membership alone. Killing leeches, mosquitoes, ticks, and tapeworms is not the same as killing cows, pigs, chickens, and fish, because they're parasites. It's an act of self-defense. We're not treating them differently because of their species. We're treating them differently because they're a threat to our well-being. Likewise, we treat plants differently, not because of their species, but because they're not sentient. Later, Neil includes this quote from The Big Bang Theory.
Vegetarians and vegans are mobility bigots. They believe that if a life doesn't move, it's fair game to be killed and eaten. This hateful philosophy is predicated on the idea that movement equals consciousness, or, if you will, a certain level of sacredness. Of course, when you ask vegetarians and vegans, they say no. They're only opposed to eating flesh. But what could be more fleshy than a mushroom, or avocado, or eggplant? The ugly truth is that they are cowards who murder and devour everything that can't run away.
I get that this was included for the sake of humor, but regardless, it's incredibly stupid. It's extremely ironic that he would accuse vegans of being ableist, considering speciesism is a form of ableism. The most common justifications people use to defend their speciesist behavior are ableist in nature. Animals aren't as intelligent as humans. They can't comprehend morality or abide by a social contract. Therefore, it's okay to exploit and kill them. Another disgusting irony in this joke is the accusation that vegans are cowards who murder and devour anything that can't run away. As if the cows, pigs, and chickens that we breed, confine, and kill can simply run away. And vegans aren't opposed to eating flesh. We're opposed to eating the flesh of sentient beings. Next, let's dig into Neil's diatribe about plant sentience.
Meanwhile, your home is constructed from up to 50 fully grown trees, each having lived a half-century. They were all cut down and milled to make the studs that framed your house, the structural beams that support it, and the hardwood floors upon which you walk. That's 250 tons of what was once oxygen-producing plant life. A chubby mouse weighs an ounce. In a single day, each tree produced up to 15 times the mouse's mass in life-sustaining oxygen. What does nature itself care more about, the mouse or the tree? When you cut a tree, does it not bleed? What is authentic pancake syrup, if not 30 times concentrated maple tree blood? When you enshroud a tree, does it not suffocate? When you deny water and nutrients to a tree, does it not wither and die? What if brainless plants were secretly sentient? That concept might be hard to embrace because we're biased by brain chauvinism. Modern computer scientists face similar challenges as they assess whether robots programmed by humans can ever be sentient. Sifting the science from the pseudoscience in the research on plant consciousness, we now know that a communication network of electrochemical signals connects microbes, low-lying plants, animals, and trees. It thrives underfoot in a fungal root system of the forest called the mycelium. Many think of it as the wood wide web. The behaviours expressed by the participating life forms have been analogized by botanists to various humans' emotional states, such as pain, joy, fear, and anger. Imagine a pod of aliens come to visit who derive all their energy and nourishment from starlight and minerals. What would they think of life on Earth? They'd see their cousins, all that photosynthesizes, and delight in their taxonomic diversity, from microscopic cyanobacteria in ponds, lakes, and seas to the mighty sequoia trees of the American Northwest that live for thousands of years. They would see all other life as hopelessly barbaric, killing all manner of living things for their survival. They would see humans as apex predators, persistent purveyors of violence, dividing themselves into those who kill and eat animals and those who kill and eat plants. Our visiting light-metabolizing aliens would be especially incensed by Earth vegetarians for slaughtering their plant brethren. Not only that, human plant eaters take special interest in reproductive organs, the flowers, the seeds, the nuts, the berries, and eat those, disrupting the life cycle of the plant. Barbaric humans further seek out the youngest versions of plants to harvest. Why else would the produce aisle in grocery stores contain infanticidal packages of baby carrots, baby spinach, baby arugula, baby artichokes, baby squash, bean sprouts? The list goes on.
Okay, that was a lot. He sounds like a dumb stoner who thinks he's a genius. He makes the common mistake of confusing intelligence with sentience. Yes, there is evidence that plants are intelligent and communicate with each other. But intelligence does not imply consciousness. All current evidence suggests that without a brain and central nervous system, an organism cannot experience suffering. Also, meat eaters kill far more plants than vegans, as it requires more plant deaths to raise animals for food than it does to feed people directly. Beef is responsible for 90% of Amazon destruction, yet Neil wags his finger at vegans for not considering that trees might be sentient. It's clear that he didn't do a shred of research on this topic. Here's more evidence of Neil's lack of research.
A blunt truth of human existence. Our three sources of energy, protein, carbohydrates, and fat, all come from killing and eating other forms of life in our ecosystem. We can get some of our necessary minerals like salt from the environment, but you can't live on minerals. Two foods rise above the I must kill to survive way of life: milk and honey. Combined, the two are rich in protein, carbohydrates, and fat, and don't require the death of any living thing for your nourishment. If you don't otherwise metabolize sunlight, a milk and honey diet would be the least violent way you could possibly live on Earth. Note that milk and honey are specifically excluded from the diet of vegans, on the grounds that you're taking food intended for calves and bees. I imagine that lactating cows and bees don't want their precious nourishment taken from them, although they can probably just make more of it. In any case, vegan philosophy prefers you kill plants for your nourishment rather than steal milk from the cow and honey from the bee.
Neil is making an appeal to hypocrisy here, but there's no hypocrisy. Vegans prefer killing plants to stealing from cows and bees because the vegan philosophy values sentience, not aliveness. The latter involves violating the rights of sentient beings, while the former does not. If Neil had done a modicum of research, he would have learned that the production of dairy for mass consumption involves killing cows. In fact, the dairy industry is one of the most violent industries on the planet. Dairy cows are forcibly impregnated, separated from their babies, and hooked up to milk machines. This process is repeated until they become so physically depleted that they're no longer profitable, at which point they're killed. Regarding honey, commercial honey often involves killing bees. But regardless of these facts, it's pretty obvious that a diet of milk and honey is not sufficient for our survival, as it lacks many essential nutrients. Such a diet would result in a slow, painful death by malnutrition. Not exactly the least violent way you could possibly live on Earth. Also, this notion that milk doesn't require the death of any living thing for your nourishment is patently false. Raw milk contains microbes that are very much alive. In order to be considered safe for human consumption, these microbes are killed in the process of pasteurization. Before we wrap up this video, I want to address something Neil said that didn't really fit into these previous categories of criticism, but deserves a response. He describes the plight of fish in gruesome detail.
Moments later, they begin to suffocate, and after they're tossed into a pile of crushed ice, they freeze to death. Those are the lucky ones. The unlucky ones get thrown back into the ocean, where they try hard to convince their fish friends of what they experienced.
Neil, you seem to have that backwards. Care to explain how death is preferable to freedom? Personally, I'd rather have a near-death experience than die. He ends the chapter with this paragraph.
To offer more perspective, consider that all species, large and small, in the tree of life, are contemporary players in Earth's land, sea, and air ecosystem. The largest known organism in the world is a single mat of mushrooms weighing 35,000 tons, nearly 2/3 the weight of RMS Titanic. This humongous fungus lurks underground and measures miles across in the Blue Mountains of Oregon. Mushrooms occupy their own kingdom of life, which split with animals in evolutionary history later than our common ancestors split from green plants. Humans and mushrooms are therefore more genetically alike than either we or mushrooms are to anything that grows in the plant kingdom. Maybe that's why we commonly say mushrooms taste meaty, an adjective never offered to kale. In a distant ancestral way, we are biting into ourselves.
Wow, what a trove of insights. Seriously though, what is this additional perspective he's supposedly offering us? The purpose of a conclusion is to tie everything together and reiterate the main point. Neil fails to do this because he has no point. Judging from this chapter, Starry Messenger fails to live up to its synopsis. Referring to the discoveries by Galileo and Copernicus, it says, "These first ever cosmic perspectives in our world were ego checks on our self-importance, messages from the stars forcing people to rethink our relationships to one another, to the earth, and to the cosmos." Neil is not inviting readers to rethink their relationship with other Earthlings. He's providing a convoluted justification for their exploitative relationship with them. He's not checking his ego, he's defending his egoic stance that humans are justified in exploiting and killing non-human animals. I haven't read it yet, but my husband insisted that I recommend the book A Copernican Revolution in Ethics by Magnus Vinding, because it does what Starry Messenger set out but ultimately failed to do. Thank you so much for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up and comment down below. And be sure to check out the rest of the videos in my Worst of the Skeptics series. Alright, peace out.
Yo, how when me eat them, I wonder when me eat. When me tell them say me no eat no fish, nah, no meat now. How when me eat them, I wonder when me yam. When me tell them say that I'm a vegan, man. How when me eat them, I wonder when me eat. When me tell them